Welcome to Going in Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and my guest this week has a an extremely lengthy resume that I'm going to try not and speak out of turn in describing, but she is Dr. Heather R. Spence, and she works in marine bioacoustics. She is a or has a PhD in behavioral neuroscience and has been recognized in places like National Geographic. She's also a TEDx speaker and was one of their recent editors' picks, specifically discussing how fish hear the world and just all undersea creatures. It's a very fascinating speech that hopefully you will go check out after we are done talking. But first, I hope you stick around here to listen to her explain her work because she's also running a new groundbreaking initiative called the Ocean World of Sound. But before we dig into all of that, just a couple quick announcements as usual. You may not know this, but there is a very powerful story behind this podcast, and you can go read about that at zachtidwell.com if you're unfamiliar with it. And if any of that piques your interest while you're there, you can also reach out to me for speaking engagements and join the mailing list because I have two big projects going on behind the scenes right now that I will be sharing information about there as it comes, specifically deals on the products that come out of those big projects. So I think that is everything that I needed to touch on. So, Heather, thank you for coming.
Very glad to be here. It's going to be a fun chat.
Yeah, it's already been nice and chaotic. We've had some scheduling miscommunications. I just had to go wrangle up groceries that were supposed to be here an hour before we started and was dropping stuff everywhere. And now we're here and life is all good and centered again, I guess. So, um, I really because I forgot to mention that you are also a musician and a composer. Sorry, again, you have so many items on your resume that I was like, I'm going to forget something. But so maybe can we start? I guess I'm very curious, specifically, even looking into your educational background. Like it seems like from the very beginning of your college experience, you were headed down this path. So I'm guessing with the little information that I have that may have started with your love of music. And
Yeah.
can you maybe tell people about all that and how this all, I guess, how that pathway, because I mean, it's a very unique path in general.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I headed down this path. I think it was probably inevitable, but I didn't really know that at the time. I was just taking one, to me, logical step after the other. To other people, they thought I was completely nuts. Um, yeah, I mean, it did. So it definitely started off with a kind of obsession with sound in music. Um, I I was really interested in how sound can and music can make you feel things, wildly different things depending on the context and the chords that are used and how it's presented. And so that was really interesting to me. I was very sensitive to sound. And so composing was almost like a coping mechanism to deal with, harsh soundscapes. So I'd kind of be like harmonizing with them and stuff. Um, and so then I was exploring sounds and instruments and making music and composing music. And what was really great was that the I went undergrad to George Washington University on a music scholarship that did not require me to major in music. I had to take a lot of music classes, so I was spending a lot of time doing music, but I could major in anything I wanted. And it started to become very clear to me that science could also explain a lot of the things that I was interested in about sound, about the world, how things work. So I was really getting into science as well as music. And that is when I was introduced to this animal, the snapping shrimp. Now we could have 5 hours just on that. But briefly, the snapping shrimp. Okay, so if you have gone, for example, snorkeling in tropical waters, you have almost certainly heard this little creature, but they're actually in relatively warm waters worldwide, and they make some of the loudest sounds. This little creature, the size of your pinky finger, has a big claw and a small claw, and it shuts the big claw shut and that creates this popping sound, and it makes it makes a popping, snapping sound, hence snapping shrimp. They're also sometimes called pistol shrimp. However, they are not mantis shrimp. That's a different thing
To ask.
Yep.
Okay.
Mantis shrimp, very interesting. Do some things with cavitation. Also have weird eyes. Not the same as snapping shrimp. Also not shrimp, but very cool creatures also. But that was not the thing that got me into sound. Snapping shrimp are the thing that got me into sound. And learning about snapping shrimp and learning how sound actually travels better in water than it does in air. And this is something that's really important to understand for ocean ecosystems, is that they are very sound based, sound centric. And so then that was kind of the aha moment for me of like, okay, I love sound and I care about the world. And here, this is something that I need to explore further, is this underwater world of sound where sound is at the center of things. And that just made a lot of sense to me. And then I kind of kept on pursuing things in my own very strange way to other people. It made sense to me.
Yeah, so first of all, I guess we might have to have you come back on to do a deep dive about crazy marine life instead of this more acoustic world at some point. I'm just even just hearing your passion talking about this stuff is it's one of those things that is kind of contagious. But with the sound traveling so much better, is that because water is so much more dense than our atmosphere?
There you go. Yep.
Uh,
Yep. And so so sound traveling, it's not like you're throwing a ball and like I throw a ball out of my mouth and your ear catches it, right? The thing that's traveling are not particles. The thing that is traveling is the wave. The density is, going, more dense, less dense. The particles are jiggling, but it's the wave that's actually traveling. And so if the particles are closer together, that facilitates the ease and speed of travel. So sound travels much more quickly in water than it does in air. We have other factors too, like, okay, you go down in the water pretty quickly in the ocean, light is not penetrating very well, but sound still doing a great job. So
Is that because, I mean, I get obviously the water is denser, but does that cause the sound waves to be compressed? And so then it takes a lot farther distance wise for them to dissipate and start to spread out?
okay, so dissipation is slightly different. Well, there's also, okay, so there's a number of different factors, but um the speed part is because the jiggling thing can go more quickly because it's denser. uh Dissipation depends, I think, on a few more factors, and is a thing that people who are much more into some of the modeling than I am, like, spend a lot of time trying to figure out, because people will ask me, okay, we'll go right into stuff, because like there's stuff you'll ask me stuff and I'll be like, oh, I can give you a great answer, but like, okay, a logical thing would be like, okay, you make this sound in water, how far does it travel? I don't know, because there are so many different things that affect that. um the topography of the bottom, the temperature of the water, the layering of the water, like all kinds of
Mm.
different things can impact that. You could
Yeah.
sit by playing a sound and listening, right?
Yeah.
That takes some effort, and it's going to be different each time. So anyway, the ocean is complicated, sound is complicated, and there you are.
Yeah, I didn't even think about obviously different salinities on top of everything else too.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
that was
yep.
I told you I'd ask you a dumb question, so we got the
No,
first thing
these
right
are great. I
away.
love this. Let's dive right into the tough stuff.
Yeah. So again, it is even just your fascination with all of that is very unique. Or do you just have the mind of needing to know how things work? Is that just kind of the inclination that you have generally in life?
That's a great question. I don't really think of myself that way. It may have, maybe in like certain ways, I think it is a little bit less conscious and more emotional
Hmm.
in my case. Because when I think about somebody who just needs to know how things work, I think about people like the person who will like take apart their computer. you know, like how do all these parts work to make this whole, more of like an engineering mindset, or in a science case, like, okay, I need to understand the mechanisms of how this thing functions. I think for me it's more of a like, and maybe also over time it has become a like a, well, maybe at the beginning too, more of a practical applied kind of mindset. Like, okay, I want to understand how it works, but I'm also like an actor in that process of like harmonization, for example, or conservation. I'm finding like how it works, but it's kind of towards towards something that harmonious in my case.
In terms of harmonizing your other interest of music with this effort.
In terms of, personally, in terms of kind of dealing with the world and finding a way to happily be in it and have a role in things, but more broadly to how to make, really boils down to how do we make the world a better place or better see ourselves in it? How do we be actors for positive impact?
Yeah. It's, something that really struck me about your TEDx talk was that you mentioned that Aristotle wrote about the sounds that fish make back in the
Mm-hmm.
fourth century. And just, and it's because of where you went after that, it was also like relevant to me. I wasn't like an avid scuba diver, but I was a scuba diver before I shot myself. So like I've done on the certifications and stuff like just for basic open water stuff, and I've gotten to dive, and like it's almost, yes, the own noise that you make being down there was one thing, but also just like the overwhelming awe of like I'm 60 feet under the sea right now, crawling around watching
Yes.
these fish or whatever was just
Yeah.
I and it's been, gosh, I probably dived the last time in 2017. So I think it's been a long time, but I was like, yeah, I don't remember hearing anything other than my sounds. And
Yes.
even the last, like the open water dive that I did was it was raining that day, and we were sitting 60 feet down looking up at the surface, and you could see it's pouring rain, and just like that visual of it, and still no sound all the way down there. So it was just, it's made me think about that a lot. And like, have you thought about how Aristotle or his incumbent at the time would have come to have realized that? I mean, I guess, is it because they weren't, if they were in the water and sticking their head underwater, there wasn't other gear and things like that? Or do you think, like more and more information is coming out about these ancient civilizations, or proof that there were older civilizations, and the timeline of the modern human keeps getting pushed farther and farther back. Have you, I guess maybe that registered for me on a lot deeper level that it should have, but what have you thought about all that?
So I think that there's an interesting story maybe to be told around doing observing by listening to the normal everyday things that humans do and being connected to those rhythms and jobs of life. So for example, fishing. So even now, if you, and I have, like, talk with people who fish for a living, they know about fish sounds because sometimes when you take a fish out of the water, it's not very happy about that and it tells
Mm.
you. And this is something, but it's kind of outside of the realm of science, right? Because that's in like the commercial side of people doing that. And so I imagine that maybe then as well, it was more a matter of talking with people or doing your own like listening, observing, like a careful listening, right, could reveal discoveries even without a whole lot of advanced technology. And we have advanced technology, which is great now that we can do all these cool things. But I think it really comes down to that careful listening just in some kind of normal settings.
Hmm. Yeah, and I had never even thought of that. Obviously, I fished. I haven't. It's not like I've been on a commercial fishing boat though, and it just, yeah, that's interesting. It was just it, that thought in then also hearing the sound clips that you showed from some of your own work, where it is a cacophony of sounds, like oh, just overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
And it's just yeah. So like your research started with this snapping shrimp, and you just got honed in on that, and it kind of led everything else was just downstream of following, I guess that interest or what?
Well, I mean, yeah, if you look at me on paper, you're like, what? It makes sense. It makes sense though. So I the thing is, so I was so I did my undergraduate senior thesis on snapping shrimp, and I did this very elaborate multi-part study that was way more than I should have been attempting to do, than that involved studying their morphology, distinguishing species based on their morphology, which is basically how they look, their parts, um, their development. So I was looking at like baby shrimp as well, and their eggs and like how they develop, and their behavior, including their snapping behavior. And I was very fortunate that one of the professors in George Washington University, not known for its access to the ocean and marine biology, right? So I was doing all of this in a lab that was really not designed for this, and I had to make my own seawater. That is uh not something that's really fun. So seawater, it's not just salt and water, right? You got to put some other minerals and stuff in it, and they need things for them to be able to molt successfully and stuff like that. So, and one of the professors in the department, this was huge, allowed me to use her at the time extremely like new fancy microscope camera. So this was great because what I was already finding and having to fight against was this culture of invertebrate biology, where if you're studying it, the idea is basically these creatures are easier to study when they're dead. And this is so pervasive in biology, which is supposed to be the study of life. But actually, when you come down to some of like the basic foundational stuff in the way that biology has been traditionally done, it comes down to, for example, like species, right? People heard like, oh, species, or like identifying new species, or like think, okay, all that kind of stuff coming down to species, which biologists will argue about what is a species, but like that's a very foundational concept. And how do you identify and define a species? Well, you take a member of that species and you kill it and you put it in a museum. And so there's a huge foundation of death in this study of life. I was coming across that very forcefully because people are like, well, you're trying to distinguish these species. Well, then you should pickle the shrimp and put them in a jar and then study them. Instead, I figured out a way with this lovely microscope camera to track them over time and to take portraits of them alive with and taking photos of them instead. And by doing that, which was challenging because shrimps are wiggly, uh but I kind of figured like some like the lighting and the stuff and like how much water to put, anyway. So it took a little bit, but it was worth it because then I realized there were these things that were being completely missed. So in this study of how to distinguish the species based on their parts, certain things were really being missed. For example, when you pickle them and put them in jars, their very delicate parts are often the first things to like break apart and fall off, like their antennae. Well, the antenna of the shrimp is an extremely important part of the shrimp. That's how it's sensing the world. Turns out these two species that were allegedly very difficult to tell apart, if you studied their antennas, like they were completely different from each other. But you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that from them in a jar. And another thing which is really important is that and when I say pickle them, I mean you put them in formaldehyde and then you put them in a jar. The formaldehyde makes it so that they lose their color. So there were color differences as well. And the color differences were were pretty impressive. So I don't remember what you were
No,
asking me
you're
because
good.
now I'm talking about shrimp.
No, it's all interesting. I was just absorbing what you were saying. I was
Oh, I
kind of
remember now, but go ahead.
yeah, I
Circling
was
that.
just trying to basically get the segue from where you started and
Oh, to now? Like what?
well, just because it is again, it
Yeah.
is like you said it, looking at you on paper is like, what the hell? What? How do you get from point A to point D here? And it is
Yes.
just, but it's, I this also what you were saying, and you can finish your point, and then I can ask the questions that just came up along the way so that I don't throw you off farther, but that
Sure.
brought up more questions for me. So,
I mean, it's all good. I mean, I do remember though where I was going with that. I got sidetracked by the shrimp, which I said that I would.
and you're
To be
fine.
fair.
I have questions about the shrimp now. So that's
Well,
perfect.
the brief aspect of this story, and I also hope, anybody who is listening or maybe knows somebody who needs to hear this, is that I got a lot of no's to this path that I'm on. And it's easy for me to say now because here I am, like we're on a podcast, like I have been successful. So it's great, now I can talk about it like, oh, ha, 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 here's what I did. But actually, it was incredibly difficult because I was going on this path and people were like, that is not a path. You cannot do that path you were trying to do. Too many things. It doesn't make any sense. Stop. I've had so many people tell me to stop what I was doing. So that's just to say that if you're somebody out there and you have your passions and you want to do them together and it maybe doesn't fit neatly in a category, like it, there are ways to just go for it. Even if people tell you no.
Yeah, that's how innovation happens. You get someone who's bold enough to step outside of those lines. And
Yeah.
I think it seems like that would be a uniquely or potentially a uniquely dogmatic environment from the sense of you've got other researchers who've been doing this for 40 years. And then sometimes you just need a fresh set of eyes to come in. And then that is, I mean, that's companies see breakthroughs in that. Obviously, science sees breakthroughs in that. And it's just for whatever reason, it's we as humans, in whatever it is, will fall down that lane. I don't know if that's because we are, like pattern recognizing machines or what, but even when we've established the patterns, we seem to continue to follow them. But I think that is important for people to hear. And with the taking the approach of studying things live, because that kind of was surprising to me that was, I guess, a bold step that is the case. Has that started to become more of a norm? Maybe not the norm, but is that more commonly practiced now in the years since you were doing that?
I don't know that things have changed all that much. There are new tools being used, like now sometimes, instead of doing dissections in biology class, there might be like a computer simulation or something like that.
Mm.
I'll probably make some biologists very angry by saying this, but like I don't really feel that, especially in like the earlier years of training, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, even graduate school. I mean, depending on what you're doing, probably don't need to do a dissection. And if dissection is being done, it's probably really important to make sure that there's a lot of respect around that situation. I feel like it's made light of sometimes, that was a living creature, right? So that like I just think that's really important to instill that awe, that humbleness, that respect. I I somehow managed to get through my training with a very minimal amount of dissection, and that was by design by me. I'm much more interested in the live creatures than looking at their insides when they're dead. That's me. I understand that there's some very important morphological, internal stuff that people do. Like that's great, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. And And I also realized, I mean, that that maybe maybe I should get myself into situations where there wasn't so much pressure on me to do that. So after doing the lab work with the shrimp, and also frankly at getting really tired of making seawater, and it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of like very personal feeling responsibility. I was like, okay, let's do something that's a little broader, more fieldwork based. And so I actually did my master's degree studying invasive species. So still doing ocean studies, marine ecology, all that stuff, especially coastal areas, but getting into some different ways of studying the same ecosystem. So I was doing field work, and I was still studying shrimp and crabs. The decapod crustaceans are all part of the, shrimp and crabs and lobsters are all part of that category, but from a different angle, and also some modeling work. So like looking to see like how invasive species might spread and how that relates to shellfish aquaculture. So that was kind of me getting a feel for fieldwork, modeling, citizen science, kind of laying the foundation for my interest in all of those things, and kind of also this, research, but also this applied aspect. And
I,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, you finish what you're saying, then I'll ask. I thought you were done, so I was not trying to cut you off. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm just giving like kind of the general arc, because then I also uh, at the same time as I was doing my master's, I around the same time, all of these things were kind of brewing that now make a lot of sense, but back then might seem like really disparate stuff. Which also was, I got an internship with the National Governors Association, which gave me kind of an angle on the policy side of things. And I also got what was called the Shapiro Traveling Fellowship. So this was actually through George Washington University, but I was applied as a recent graduate. I had, on a trip to Cancun, been curious about how the natural resources there were managed. I mean, Cancun being this massive tourism area right on this amazing ocean ecosystem, right? So I found my way to the National Parks Office, where they oversee the marine protected areas, which most people don't know, there are marine protected areas in Cancun. And they were interested in having me come and work with them. So that all was brewing as I was looking for funding to be able to come back to do that. So I got this fellowship. And so after my master's, I won the fellowship. So I moved to Mexico.
You're I and I mean this adoringly. You are such a nerd, and
Yeah.
I love it. That is so crazy.
I'll
Like,
take
yeah,
it.
I'm on vacation and I'm gonna go see what these guys are up to. That is so cool.
It was really interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
you go to a vacation, you go to a place, don't you want to kind of like meet some people and like check out how it all like, no, maybe not. Maybe you just
No, it's
want to
super
margarita on
cool.
the beach. Like that's cool too.
No, I legitimately I think that is awesome. And when I call people goobers or nerds, like I like goobers and I like nerds. I just it's I don't know, when people are passionate about something, really anything, it's I said it earlier, it's contagious to me. Like I just and this just keeps along that line of everything with that you've done here is so unique, and it's it's so interesting to me. With the I was curious with the kind of touching back to the approaches that you took on a larger scale. Obviously, it seems like you've shown that there is definitely a place for studying these organisms in while they are alive in this way. But at the is that currently is that feasible from I mean, I would imagine the amount of data processing and storage that goes into all of that and the who knows how much a freaking microscopic camera or microscope camera costs. Like, is that something that with today's technology it could actually be applied on a rather large scale for in the in the scope of world marine biology or even other just wildlife biology research?
So there's a big trend now towards in situ ocean study with like massive advances in technology. So whereas once you kind of needed to put the creatures in some setting where you could observe them, there are now a lot of advances in technology so you can study them like in the place where they live, which is arguably better because you know what they're naturally doing. Now, if you're trying to do a more of an experimental study, that could be tricky,
Yeah.
but there's been some great advances, especially with underwater sound monitoring equipment, which is the area that I'm most specialized in. That's been amazing since since I started looking into it and starting trying to use it till now. It's just completely transformed, and now it's something that citizen scientists can go and even deploy stuff and even start to analyze some things. It's really incredible. Whereas before it's just incredibly bulky, awkward, glitchy, strange. So so that part I think helps. There's also work that I feel like there's pressure from the other end. So like spoiler alert, because then I went and worked with dolphins. So like nobody so all that time with the shrimp, like imagine the contrast. Like there I am doing, a PhD with dolphins. Not once during my entire PhD did somebody tell me to pickle that dolphin and stick it in a jar.
Mm,
Right?
funny how, yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
so so there's also pressure at the other end where if there's concern for the creature, then there's less pressure to do that. And there's a lot of interesting work going on there. I feel like probably where the most advancement has happened for this with invertebrates has probably been with cephalopods. Because now is there's like, wait, octopuses are cool, they're in,
They
right?
know how smart they are now, and I think that's something we like humans generally recognize intelligence a lot and attach to, we take more issue with when something is much closer to our level of intelligence. It's where it's like for whatever reason, then we do view it differently. And I say we, including myself, like I think very differently of a whale in SeaWorld versus a fish in a big fish tank. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the perception of the animal and how it relates to us, and yes, as you say, its intelligence is a big part of that. So I think as we learn more about pain and communication and other aspects of creatures that are very different from ourselves, these things are evolving. But I think some of the foundations are still the same, but there are some changes and some technologies that are helping and some research that's demonstrated different creatures' abilities that has made a difference. But I wouldn't say I mean, it's just a slow change, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that is a monumental shift to start changing how people think about things. I mean, it's kind of ties back into the us falling into a lane in general, and like everyone does that. That is so. It's not like I'm not criticizing anyone or a group
Yeah.
of people, but it's
No.
with the when
One of my best friends does, medical research with animals that she has to quote sacrifice, right? And we talk about this stuff. It's I think the main thing is like it's not to be taken lightly.
yeah, I think the way that you put it with a respect for it and like an awe for what it was, I think is very, that's a great way to put it. And when we can move on after this, you've said citizen scientist a couple times. I want to make sure you're talking about the general public who are interested in science.
Yes, and participating in it. So sometimes
Okay.
it's called participatory science. There's different words for it, but basically that's the idea, is that, you know, maybe you can still contribute to the process of science without needing to necessarily get a PhD and make it your main gig.
Yeah, I mean that's been a big thing with this whole three eye atlas phenomenon coming through. I mean, there's been when people aren't getting imagery from mainstream sources, it's people out there with, who knows how many tens of $1,000 personal telescopes that are getting images out there of this thing and tracking it worldwide. Again, the technology is just, we're in such a cool time,
Yeah.
just in general. But
Yeah.
and I would imagine over the course of your career, because of how long it takes to get to that level of education, like you've even seen the shifts in things, which is
Yes.
just
Yes.
so. With this, and before we get into the dolphins stuff, because I'm sure this will come up with the dolphins too.
Mm.
I think this whole, you know, with all of these sounds that we've kind of talked about, just from the general side of it to the shrimp to, we know dolphins are communicating through so, which is, now that I say that, I'm like, that's silly to think that fish, or to have thought that fish didn't make sounds when we know like dolphins and whales do. Which I know they're babbles, but it's what, what's like, even that snapping shrimp having two different sized claws. I mean, they are using that to communicate. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so did that start to become a shift for you when you started working with dolphins?
I think I view everything as all kind of part of the same system. So for me, the real difference working with dolphins was like the different culture around it and the different level of sophistication of the tools and the types of analyses that were being done. As part of why I went there. I know some people are like, oh, as a kid, like I just dreamed about working with dolphins. And like maybe be like, oh, well, maybe you just like had to work with shrimp first and then you finally got to work with dolphins. That
Yeah.
wasn't really, no. I mean, I like dolphins, right? Like they're pretty amazing. They are in fact jerks, as people describe.
I've heard that.
That's true. Uh, yeah. So it's really interesting that that was the thing that really got me. There's all the sophistication around the ways that dolphins communicate and the categorizing their different sounds and all of this kinds of stuff that just wasn't happening with some of these other creatures. So that's why I wanted to do that, because I wanted to go where things were the most advanced and kind of bring that knowledge to the whole ecosystem. But I mean, there's so much that we don't understand, really. We're just I think the dolphins are just laughing at us at this point. Like
Yeah.
I
Just
I
screwing with us.
I sometimes joke like, dolphin like, pokes up on land, like checking to see if there's intelligent life up there. There's not, so it goes back down into the water.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, again, it's, I expect in the next 20 years or so that these large language models will be able to start, or applications of similar types of these models will start to be able to at least recognize traceable patterns in their communication and start to really capture a better idea of just how incredibly intelligent some of these animals are. But
If
I mean,
it's
that's
done
that.
about the right way.
Yeah, that's
Because if you feed it in things through a human filter, with our 2D representations, I mean, a lot of these things are being fed images rather than the sounds itself, for example.
like images of the sound waves.
So that you're already processing it through our human 2D graphing mindset. And I think you're losing a whole bunch of stuff that way. Well, it's like you gotta train it on the things that we, like to get try to use artificial intelligence, right? To get what human intelligence is missing, We
Yeah.
got to train it on like our gaps, our get out of our biases.
Well, and that's why I changed my verbiage from these large language models because I was like, that's not, those are literally built, those are probability tables on human speech. Like, it doesn't make sense. But I think you at least saw where I was going with that.
Yeah.
But it's,
Yes.
with, but even with dolphin communication, I guess, like down this thread, in the past couple of years, I was made aware that I guess first that these offshore wind farms existed. I always thought they were just on land for some reason, and then that they were affecting whales. Did you see that with the dolphins too? That their ability to navigate, their ability to communicate, and other things like that.
So I was studying noise in dolphin habitats.
Okay.
And so it's interesting because I think something to recognize about dolphins. So sound is not just communication for them, it's also like their understanding of place and navigation, and like because they are also using echolocation, and it's like this three-dimensional surrounding for them. And so that gets back to the whole like centrality of sound in the ecosystem thing. So we know some things about noise impacts. So there's the very immediate impact thing of like there's a very loud sound that can have like a direct physiological impact where there's perhaps even hearing loss. But then there's all the more subtle stuff. And we can kind of think about it ourselves, right? So we have noise in our own environments, and sometimes it makes it so we can't focus. Sometimes it makes it so we can't hear each other. Sometimes it's just like super annoying, and like you just know like your blood pressure is going up, right?
As being someone who's blind and can only hear out of one ear, yes, yes, loud. So I think some of that's brain injury too, but like loud environment will, yes, like legitimately make me like in the not angry to the point. I think I'm not yelling at someone where I start getting a little butthurt. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it totally does. It's very disruptive, and
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
not using
Disruptive.
that
That's a great
spatially.
word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that's like, okay, well, how disruptive is it? Yeah, is it and also how long is it going on? In what location? Is there a way to get away from it? All that kind of stuff. Because even like little behavior changes can add up over time. And so we know some of these changes could be going away from the sound, going toward the sound, speaking louder because there's noise masking communication, changing the frequency of communication to get around some noise, stuff like that. That
Mm.
can all can add that can add up, and that can mean stress, which then that's come back down to something quite a physiological impact.
Yeah.
And it's something that is important to consider because it can be easy to sort of forget what's below the surface of the ocean because it's not something that's like in our face that we have to deal with all the time. And so we don't
And
really see down there.
we're so poorly suited for it.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's an
yeah.
alien place that we don't really see and we don't really hear either, right? So we aren't really hearing usually the sounds that are going on down there. We're not really tuned in to that world.
Yeah.
And yet we're putting all this stuff into it. We're putting all kinds of sounds into it. And it it's not that so I'll never say like, oh, we should have no impact. That makes no sense. Humans are part of nature. We are gonna have impact because we're part of everything. It's more like what kind of impact do we want to have? And also when we change the way we're thinking about the problem, we really can feed two birds with one scone by thinking about efficiency. So, for example, like boat motors, the purpose of a boat motor is not to put noise into the ocean, right?
Mm.
It's designed to move a boat. Well, the noise is actually energy that is lost out of the system in the form of sound. So
Mm.
so if we think about it more that way, then hey, like a more efficient boat motor that produces less noise is better for the boat motor and better for the environment. We need to be finding these kinds of scenarios where it's less like, hey, I want to do this. Oh, you shouldn't do that. It's bad for the environment. Like that's not that kind of dialogue is needs to be transformed into something that's a lot more practical. And it can be.
Yeah, and that kind of behavior is kind of combative. Even if it's not intended that way, it is risky. People don't like being told what to do just
Mm-hmm.
because. When you can make it presented in a way like that where it makes sense, it is objectively logical,
Yes.
like to everyone. Like
Yes.
yeah, that's a great. Huh. I and with that, I mean, because I feel like I should ask this before I moved on to that last question, but it came back to me when you talked about that, like centralization. I think of sound was your relative phrasing there with these, in the context of the other almost dimensions of sound in the ocean and how it's used like with a species, like I guess not just the dolphins, I mean probably used by a lot of species. What are these other differentiators between sound in that world versus sound in this world, and how it's that would need to be considered for all of that?
Mm. So I think that there are a lot of similarities because sound travels so well and some other things not so much, like light. It's maybe more central, potentially more front of mind. We don't know for sure, but one might imagine, because sound is very important to humans, but we don't always focus on it. And and I think that is part of the difference and why I call you a world of sound. That's we we experience sound. We rely on sound. It's critical for us. It's crucial to our survival, our understanding of the world. Uh, and when I say sound, I am referring to sound we experience through our ears, but also vibrations, which sound is a physical phenomenon, so we can also experience it that way.
Well,
Yet, go ahead.
or you go ahead. That pause, I was about to jump on that, but I thought you were done talking again. I apologize.
No, I mean, I could just,
No, keep
but,
going.
but, well, but I think that the idea here is that it's still really important to us here in air, but
Yeah.
but it's a focal, crucial, major component of what's going on in the oceans. Then it's I think that can be our kind of entry point to that alien world is through that perspective of sound and better understanding that. And I think that can also be helped by understanding how sound is so important to us as well. That can help us to better connect with the ocean.
Yeah, where it is potentially the primary sense in that world.
Yeah.
Mm. And it is, I mean, you mentioned what we can feel, the vibrations of noise, and that's the stereotypical question that I get asked a lot is, oh, have your senses changed since you've lost your sight? And that,
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
yeah, the so I when I shot myself, I have zero light perception. I'm deaf in one ear. I have no sense of smell, and my sense of taste is dull. So like the one ear that I do have is freaking sensitive, but it's not. When I try and describe it to people, it is like the way that it's gotten more sensitive is in that is all I'm paying attention to. And I would sure, or I, my uneducated presumption would be that all of the visual processing power that was assigned to something years ago is now assigned to that ear. And even the things that just the other things that I pay attention to, it's just your awareness. But I can, even when it's quiet, when it is dead quiet in my house and I walk past some different places, I can feel it in my ear that the room opened up or the ceiling got taller. Or if it's quiet outside and I'm walking, I can hear when I walked past a light post versus under a tree versus, past when there's a car. And it is a feeling. It is like a pressure change.
Mm, interesting. What do you
Which
do? What do you think you're receiving from that? Like, are
why
you
do I
hearing
feel it?
the reflectiveness and the absorbency of the soundscape around you?
I would think that's probably the difference is the proximity to an object is probably changing it is probably, the ambient noise that is in the background, even if it's just wind, is probably being disrupted, I would
Yeah.
guess, by the proximity of that thing. But it is literally like a different change in pressure. And it's funny because they told me when I was in the hospital still after I shot myself and once I was stable and they were starting to rehab me with stuff, they were trying to show me like to bring my awareness to it. And I just with the 1 year I was so discombobulated, but it was they told me that I would get to that point where I would hear these kinds of things. And I
Mm,
of course didn't believe them. It probably took 2 years
mm.
and before it started to develop, but it is weird. It is just like a different level of it, of the sense, I guess.
Have you tried any of the kind of interesting stuff that they? I I may not be fully up to date, but I know at one point they were trying things like mapping things out on the tongue for like spatial like seeing and stuff.
Yeah, I had heard about that when I first went to blind rehab. So I'm at, 6.5 years right now. So 6 years ago, I was kind of told that was, I don't think they were having a ton of, at least at the device that the VA was testing, because all my healthcare is through the VA.
Yeah.
They weren't having a ton of success, but I had heard about that. And I mean, you know, Elon Musk and these other with Neuralink and then some of these other different like human machine interfaces or human machine interface development companies think that they'll be able to bypass the optic nerve, not in restoring sight the way that I had it before, just like how a cochlear implant doesn't actually give you your hearing back. It is your body has to learn how to interpret these new signals. It is like a
Mm.
totally different modality of hearing. But
Yeah.
so I've been more so, I don't know. I was about to say I've been more up to date with that kind of stuff, but I don't even know that that's true. I don't think about it a lot. Literally, I know that sounds weird, but like I don't think about being blind very much until it comes up in
Mm.
conversation because I've established my new normals in life. So even
Hmm.
like when I'm skiing or working out and stuff like that, like you don't think about it. It's as weird as that probably sounds.
No, you're experience the world in your way, and so yeah. I mean, normally we don't. We're it's just as things. We're not like, oh, I'm looking at that. Oh, I'm looking at that. Oh, I'm hearing that. Oh, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling myself sitting on the like that. We would get so overwhelmed with the
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Too
Yeah.
much information.
Yeah. And I'm honest, I'm of the mind that like, and I know this is kind of off topic from your original question with them trying to map things out, but it's, I honestly, I think like just hyper focusing, not on the tech side of like what you were talking about. That would be incredible if there were advances there. I'm just saying this inside because I don't have familiarity with that stuff, but in the scope of looking into the side of technology that I'm talking about, because obviously technology is the reason I'm able to live so independently like I do, and that I was able to get back out on my own so fast afterwards. But in terms of these lofty aspirations of fixing disability, like, like my blindness, I think I think focusing on that is detrimental
Mm.
because it is, first of all, it may not come at all. And what good is focusing on it now doing and what is it preventing you from actually doing in your life when you're like, oh, well, in 15 years, they'll be able to fix it.
Hmm.
So I don't need to learn X skill now kind of thing.
What about the stuff that's like not technology, like the echolocation training or something like that?
Like where people can click to
Yeah,
travel around and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm honestly in a, I haven't tried any of that. I am horrible. If there's any sort of background noise, even like, um, skiing, I ski and whitewater kayak and stuff like that. When there's background noise, even if it's just my skis cutting through the snow and the wind in my ears, I can't really follow sound
Yeah,
very well.
yeah.
In a quiet environment, I can, but I know guys who can, who, can follow a cowbell around the mountain who are totally blind and are just they're better at it. But yeah, I know you mentioned before we started recording, like your mom's vision, it sounds like is pretty bad. Does she do that stuff?
I don't know what she does.
Oh.
She she copes like so she has some vision, but it's like weird. And she has this a condition that is normally corrected. She probably has multiple things, but she at least one of the things is she has something that's normally corrected in children, but it wasn't discovered until she was like way, way, way an adult,
Oh.
like kind of recently. Because and so that I think kind of sort of true point. Like she didn't know how much she didn't see, so she just did
Yeah.
what needed to be done as best as she could. So yeah, it's sometimes I'll kind of play games with it, be like, hey, can you see like what do you see when I'm
Yeah.
doing like these things?
She's
Yeah.
like, I thought side swiping cars every day was normal. I thought everyone did that.
Yeah, the driving is not no, there's no that's not gonna happen.
That's one technological thing that would
That's
be
that's a big
hugely helpful. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But I just from the I don't know if it's actually viable from the sense of someone who's totally blind because like okay when the car parks I still need to get to the building and not get hit by a car and
Mm,
stuff like that. But I don't know. It would be helpful. But even like just being able to see the outlines of where the sidewalk meets the grass, or
mm.
okay, there's a table there and stuff like that would be
Maybe like
cool.
a consistency of things to expect might also
Yeah.
be nice, but they feel like everything's like all kind you just never know what it's going to be. Okay, but here's a question for you. What do you think about the so for there's been this whole thing with like hybrid or electric cars that are quiet and giving them a sound. What is your
That's smart.
thought? You think it's good? See, I hate it, but okay, tell me why.
Oh, it's irritating, especially when it's like it will be in a parking lot and you hear three cars that sound like a Jetsons car. It is, but it's smart because it is specifically if it's quiet, if there's not a bunch of background noise, I would hear one of those cars backing up just from the tire, the gravel under the tire, even the little sand that's in a parking lot. But I moved out of downtown Denver 2.5 years ago. In Denver, I wouldn't have just heard like I needed those noises, especially I to get to my college campus, one of the streets that I had to cross was 7 lanes of traffic. I'm doing that with one ear. I need to hear something. I need to hear some sort of noise from those cars because that's how you listen to the traffic pattern to analyze what you think is going on. Okay, the perpendicular traffic doesn't have turn lanes, but the parallel traffic does, but on the far side, there's a left turn lane and they seem to get the turn signal before anyone else is allowed to go. So, like, I can't go until after traffic starts moving entirely parallel to me and stuff like that. And in those contexts, like, yes, hearing the car is very, I think it probably does save some people from getting run over.
Interesting. Yeah,
Seeing better sounds would be cool.
yeah, maybe do that a little better,
Yeah.
more directional, or yes, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also like the talking walk signs, but then of course sometimes cars don't obey traffic signals, so there's
They also aren't very common. And so it's one of those things where like you still need to have the skill of listening in
Yeah.
cross, and human frogger is a real thing. Um, but I didn't mean to derail us so much with that. Sorry.
No, I
Okay.
did because I'm interested.
Okay. And we can talk about it more if you want, but I do want to be able to cover the ocean world of sound specifically. So if you have more questions, I'm happy to, we can stay down the blind path, but I want to get to that and
Yeah,
delve into it.
let's do it.
Okay. So what is this huge initiative that is happening? And you just, I, again, there were so many wickets from the research that I did on you. What you just received the support that you're now receiving is like the first of its kind, correct? From a funding perspective and with a project of this kind.
So we maybe you're talking about the work that we did in Maldives, possibly. Okay, we have several. Okay, this may not be surprising, but we got a few things going on from about different angles, right? So basically, this work is rooted in the Mesoamerican reef, which uh, is a lot of it is in the Mexican Caribbean, and so Cancun is located on like the most northernmost part of that. And basically, the the driving force to creating this was marine protected areas and resource management needing good streams of rich data to inform management, but without a whole lot of money to throw at it, money or people. So how do we, that's a problem, and it's not uniquely a problem in that area. And so we are now also globally coming in consulting to help other areas, especially coastal areas with tourism, but like, yes, there's tourism money coming in, but there's not necessarily a lot of money for resource management. How do you do things in a way that you could still, without disrupting things, collect data? And along with that is this realization that learning to listen and recognizing the ocean as a world of sound is a way to help people connect more with this alien environment in the ocean. It helps people connect on an emotional level. So we could talk about it, but like actually feel it, to feel it, have a personal emotional connection. That is a really powerful thing. It's a powerful thing for community-based conservation, for locals to get involved in studying and listening to their own resources, for visitors and tourists and other people globally to get an interest as well. And that is really exciting to see, because we're having this merging of the science and the research and the music and the art and the activism and the community building all coming together with sound at the center of it. And so we're recording the sounds, we're sharing the sounds, and we're working on ways to make them like not just accessible, but like massively accessible. So we're experimenting with putting them up on our YouTube channel. So anybody can just go, and you can go, and some people say it's like very nice to like take a nap too. So you can go try that out if you like.
White noise or maybe blue noise, and it.
Yeah, blue noise. I love that. Might take that.
Do it. Yeah, that'd be cool.
So you can hear the sounds of the coral reefs. I mean, some people going in like recognizing like different things and putting in notes about at this timestamp, like I heard this.
Oh,
Like in the comments. Yeah. So we're experimenting with that, and I encourage anybody who wants to go check it out. You could actually go listen to these coral reefs. And then of course beyond that there's other ways of kind of interpreting. So like sometimes, like with visual data, you wouldn't just necessarily like, oh, here's some visual data. Let me just look at that. Like, what does it mean? Working with it, spending time with it, kind of playing with it. And so that's what I literally do with composing is literally like jamming with the data and like listening to it and like exploring like it on like different time frames and stuff like that. And then sometimes bringing in instruments to serve as kind of tour guides through the soundscape and help to understand what the patterns, what's going on.
That is really cool. And maybe this isn't even, is there a limit to, with current technology, how deep you can go with these kinds of recordings because of the increase of water pressure as you get deeper and deeper?
Now, not really. You can
Okay.
go super deep. We tend
Okay.
to do more shallow water just because of the ecosystems we've mostly been focused on, like coral reefs, like coastal coral reefs. But you can, wearing some of my other hats too. Like you can go down like quite quite deep, like to the seafloor in deep areas, and you have, instead of having like a plastic shell around it, you might have like a metal
Okay.
shell,
Yeah.
right? So it's possible.
And where I was going with that, I guess, was on one end, I guess the logical way you would assume is checking out the way life is running in the deepest areas of the sea where it's dark, and even the kinds of aquatic animals down there are very, very different from the ones that are up near the surface. But also, has the government started to get behind what you're doing at all? And have they reached out? There's, again, I don't know how much of this stuff is real, because the disclosure, all the disclosure stuff out of nowhere kind of makes me very skeptical. But it's, at least some of the disclosure stuff that has occurred is also around things being in the ocean, and also, just even to not be in a weird territory here. So much of the ocean is unmapped. It seems like having more microphones out there, even in the areas that we haven't been able to consolidate resources to map, would at least be something. And maybe as the technology improves, even you could analyze the sound coming into those microphones to get some understanding of the topography, at least in the immediate area around those microphones.
Yeah. Well, and not just the topography, but you could get other understandings of like the dynamics of the area, right,
Mm,
over time. So I think so much of what's happening, and a lot of that is just practical, are snapshots, right? Like,
yeah.
okay, here's this thing, like here's like the topography of the bottom. Here's a fish count that we did at this area on this particular day. And what's really exciting, I think, about the what's called passive acoustic monitoring. So it's just the listening, putting something down and then listening over a long period of time, is you're getting a much more long term, and 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 you're getting not just a snapshot, you're getting day and night and cycles and baseline, and without human presence as well, which is so key. Like that's the passive part, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of the way that we determine like the topography, the bathymetry of the ocean, right, is like sonar pings and stuff. Like, cool, right? Like this is not emitting sound. It's just receiving the sound. And so, and also, like, unlike, for example, going out counting fish, you got a boat, you got a human, has to be good weather, it needs to be either during the daytime or you gotta have to have a flashlight. Like this is just sitting there. It's just eavesdropping, right?
Yeah.
So we're like literally like bugging the ocean floor, eavesdropping on what's going on. Like you can get a lot of really interesting stuff that way. And it is a process to figure out, okay, well then as things get better and you can collect more data, well then, okay, the analysis and the storage, and you were already alluding to that earlier, right,
Yeah.
becomes complicated. But I think these are problems that are solvable, like, and they are being solved, not always like exactly at the time that you need them,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always like one step over the line of what storage like can do. I'm always like maxing out like every computer and hard drive.
Yeah.
But okay, but things are getting like way better. And now, now there's memory, solutions, and there's like battery and other power solutions, and all kinds of things are happening to make this more and more possible and accessible.
Yeah.
And now there's now a device that, well, you can't just like, oh, I'll just go online like whenever and buy it, but like it's getting to the point where it's becoming like more available, and it's under $200, and you can program it fairly simply and put it out and get some data, and it's pretty cool that
I,
you could just get some wave files that you could just play. And yeah.
there's there's either a tech company or a government working on quantum storage right now. I guarantee you. They're like, oh yeah, we'll store your data in an alternate dimension, or there. I'm sure somewhere else in the universe, like there'll in the next 100 years, there's going to continue to be some just weird breakthroughs with all that stuff. Where it's, I mean, and that's the natural course of things, where it gets cheaper and also more effective over time. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see over the coming years as technology continues to just fly forward.
Yeah.
If you end up with some acoustic map of the entire ocean or something,
Yeah.
I-
But then you'll have a place to put it. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and what I'll also say is that, analysis is really, it's tricky, but there's more and more tools coming out with that. What I will say is that you can always go back and reanalyze the old data, or like explore new ways, or store it in a different way. What you can't do is go back and re-record.
yeah,
And so while like the sexy stuff is like the analysis and the papers and the scientific papers and the press releases and all that things, I do feel that there has to be some priority on the data collection, because you can never go back and collect that data ever again. Once that sound is gone, it's gone.
yeah.
So that's critical, is that we, even if we're not going to analyze them right away, we document some of these soundscapes, so that then we at least have that baseline that we can come back and compare to.
Yeah, and it's just, ha has any of this started to, these same efforts started to bleed over to the terrestrial world in terms of analyzing, the sound of plants or other things like that?
so so I do kind of a fun thing with the U.S. Botanic Garden.
Okay.
And it's like, what is a marine biologist doing at the Botanic Garden? Well,
Drowning the plants.
yeah. What does saltwater do to these? Yeah. Um, yeah, but like anything else, like sounds crazy, but it makes total sense. So like acoustic ecology is kind of my like frame of reference for the world, like sounds, how sounds and creatures and environment all interact with each other. Sounds are important to plants. So plants make sounds, turns out. Too high for us to hear, so we weren't really listening, but they make sounds themselves. Of course, humans use plants to make things that make sounds, so that's
Mm,
clear as well. Plants respond to sounds, and plants alter our soundscapes, right? Through the way that they scatter or absorb sound. They very much change the way that our environment sounds to us. So there's all this interesting stuff with plants and sounds. And so I do these kind of I did a lecture as well, but I mostly, what I do is I do have like an interactive booth that I'll go there, and with like a fruit instrument people can play, which is fun, but it's really like, it's like the gateway drug to learning about plants and sound.
yeah.
And so then it's really cool, because everybody kind of walks away with some new tools to use, and like a new appreciation for plants. Once you start thinking about plants like speaking kind of, right? Or like how they react to sounds. It's really pretty pretty neat. I think it makes people think differently about built spaces as well and how sound travels in their environments and affects their feeling of a place.
Well, and we know like trees will basically communicate through the mycelium that links all of their roots in the soil. They will, if one tree is sick, they will send nutrients to that tree. Like this is just scratching the surface again, almost of all of these different dimensions or facets of these systems where
Mhm.
kind of like what you talked about earlier, where it's okay, we maybe haven't been paying attention to every vector here. And
Yeah,
now we're starting to, it's just all of it is so interesting. And it's
yeah,
just also, I mean, I think having what makes it more interesting is the fact that there was a person like you who's like had this thought of like that is outside the bounds of what someone else has done, where it's like, let's see what this does. And it just, it's, I don't know, it's so cool. What other, are there any other big implications from this in specifically in all of your work in the subaquatic world of that you think should be paid more attention to in our world? I know I can't remember if I brought it up earlier, but you also mentioned in your TEDx speech, like we think of ourselves as living on land, and while that is accurate, that is not a complete picture. We are living in air, just like fish are in water. Like our atmosphere is a medium.
yes,
It's the difference between the atmosphere and being in the vacuum of space. So like
yeah.
it's yeah, what do you feel like should be, if anything, should
Mm.
be more in our scope and in our world that isn't being considered already?
Yeah, I do think this spatial awareness thing is something that we could be more mindful of. And part of it is understandable. I mean, we walk on the land, and the way that we have things set up. I mean, so our sensory, pretty much our main sensory organs are all kind of facing in a particular, facing in front of us.
As predators typically do.
Yeah. And so we have these things, and then enforced this reinforced this more through like screens. And so I think the idea of immersion really fascinates me to kind of get us out of that, like that kind of, okay, well, like we've got ourselves just looking in front of us at a flat screen. Like, let's open that up more. And it's not that we aren't receiving information from all directions, it's that we're not focusing on that information in all directions. And so immersive experiences, I think, can help shift that thinking. And there's actually been interesting neuroscience research on, for example, focal distance and like the way that you are and the way how that affects how you're thinking. And a short focal distance is more appropriate for like detail oriented thought versus like a long focal distance more appropriate for like the big picture kind of
Mhm.
thinking. And so literally experiences, art, music that gives us an immersive experience is going to actually literally change the way that we're thinking about the world. Imagine how that could influence the decisions that people make and the outcomes of that decision making. And so I think
So,
it's really important
mhm.
for us to create, theater, music installations. We're working on one right now for Art Week in Mexico City in February. It's going to be like an immersive installation about the ocean world of sound. Like, these are things that here are tangible things we can do to shift our thinking and literally expand how we're thinking about solutions. I think it could be a huge game changer.
Outside of augmented reality and virtual reality stuff, where currently there's a screen and then the headphones essentially. And what, because again, that also comes back to we only have so much bandwidth that we can pay attention to with something that's even like, I feel like, can't remember if I've heard this or if I've just noticed this. Like, I feel like women seem to be much better at multitasking than men do. And you're not literally multitasking, but it is some sort of being able to asynchronously think about things where it's, your focus is shifting on a fast time between those things. But like, it's if things were immersive like that, do you mean more immersion than these kind of budding technologies?
I don't think it's multitasking. I think it's synthesis. So the coming together of things in an experience of place. And so VR, like, it has some potential, but it's still working with, like, your visual field, right? And a very curated auditory experience, versus some things that, like, might be a little bit more low tech. Maybe you're walking through a room and you're hearing, something on this side, something different over here, or there's some imaging. And you have some agency in how you're exploring that space, and maybe even the way that you explore the space changes how the space responds to you. And then it's that kind of experience. And I'll say one of the coolest things I've done. I hope that we can resurrect this. We just need to find some funding to get this back going. We did a really cool project, a group of us, that was the immersive mesopelagic performance lab. And it was basically an immersive experience for people to experience the mesopelagic zone of the ocean, which is kind of that interesting twilight zone area where the light's filtering out and it's becoming completely dark. And it's a place that's, like, not all that well known. It's very alien, all of that. And we had a series of experiences, low tech, things like projectors onto filmy fabrics, people doing bioluminescent dances, a game with, like, flashlight clickers and that where you had to find other fish. We had some stuff with echolocation as well, ways to help people not just understand echolocation, but do it themselves in different ways, with sound, with light. So I think these kinds of things are possible, even very low tech, and maybe even better, somewhat low tech.
Yeah, and that makes more sense. I guess I was picturing like just full. I think I was picturing something that's like a very drastic, I guess, take on the idea of immersion. But yeah, I have a wild imagination, so that's probably why. But
It should also throw people into the ocean, because, as you said, like, the experience of scuba diving, even though your hearing is more difficult because of the sound of the breathing, it is amazing to get underwater and then you're looking up at the surface, not down. I remember that moment, and, like, there's fish swimming above me, like, all around. Like, it's such an incredible feeling.
yes,
The world has just flipped, and, like, you're a part of this really cool space.
I will never forget that sight of the rain just. I mean, just absolutely pelting the ocean surface from 60 feet down. Like it was, you're down next to these giant black rocks, and just it's a weird the separation between that visual and not hearing any of it, and you're just hanging out down there, and it's kind of cold, but it just
Yeah.
it is alien. There's something very it's just it's such a striking experience to have, and I would love to try it again at some point blind. I've got my sinuses basically, they like refilled this. My sinuses, the bridge of my nose, and my eye socket, and I've got some bullet fragments in my ear, so I don't know if I'd be able to pressure or, equalize.
Like,
And I'll have to
you
get
could go,
checked
you
out.
could just do like really, I mean, okay, not a doctor, but I would imagine, right? You could do some pretty cool diving, just shallow water. I mean, that's my favorite diving, obviously. You don't have to worry about decompression, but you have an air supply so you can stay down longer. I think it's like pretty cool. And there's lots of interesting stuff to hear. So come on down to Cancun, come to our research sites.
I would love to go down there. I absolutely love traveling, so we'll have to talk about that because that would be so cool. And I've got a buddy. Actually, he's been on here before. He's been in the military for 30 years now. He's a Green Beret and he's a combat diver. Like he's been wanting to take me diving. I'm like, who better to take me freaking scuba diving than this guy? But
Yeah.
that would be so cool.
We should both come down and then we'll do like a really cool podcast episode after chatting about it.
That would be
On
super cool.
location.
And that would be he's getting ready to retire. Like that would be cool. That would be so cool. So we'll have to talk about it. Where else can people find everything that you're doing? This ridiculous log of work that you're doing.
So I have a website. So it's heatherspence.net, net like, marine biology. On there's links to most of my other stuff. I have a YouTube channel. I have a link tree that has, if you want to find certain specific stuff. I'm on the major social media channels, and I'd be happy to engage with people. You can find out how to contact me through my website, and if any of this like resonates, right? We do all kinds of partnerships, and we love wacky ideas. So
Okay. Well, hopefully some people head your way after hearing this. We've covered a lot of ground, so
yes.
it has to have piqued. I mean, there's enough in there for if certain parts of it didn't pique your interest. I feel like something has to. So, yeah, thank you for.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say too, there's also some resources in there too. So through my YouTube channel, and there's also the Ocean World Sound YouTube channel, we have some listening exercises. So you can just listen to ocean sounds, but you can also go through our kind of guided 30-day challenge to learn to listen more actively to the sounds around you and to the ocean itself. So there's stuff, free resources in there too, for your personal use, or you could use them in the classroom. So
Awesome. That's all super cool. So, thank you for all of this. This was fascinating and just letting me. I warned you I was going to ask you stupid questions. So
I thought they were all excellent questions. I love this.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this. So, yeah.
Me too.
And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. As I just said, that was a lot of ground to cover. And if you know someone who's interested in science or just in the ocean or sound, there is something in here for everyone. So find another curious mind who needs to hear it and send it their way. Other than that, I will see you next time. Bye.